so that the students who are unable to attend our live session have the accessibility of looking at the recording. Now, we have a very special guest in studio this morning, in cyberspace, should I say, and it is a very learned and a very experienced individual from the South African Police Service. I'm going to ask that he unmute himself and introduce himself and get cracking with the presentation. He will take us through the presentation, and then we will take questions and answers at the end. Thank you, General.
Thank you so much, Prof, and good morning to you and good morning to the guests. Thank you once more for the opportunity to share the knowledge with the other students and colleagues. I think I will commence. I'll start with, just remove this, yeah. Okay. The focus and objective of the presentation. I'll start by saying forensic science is an intriguing discipline that has helped solve numerous criminal cases. As you know, that we have millions of cases in court, and for them to go through, we need the assistance of forensic science, which talks to the fundamental principle that takes it through for its success. And the fundamental principle I'm talking to is the LOCARD principle, which is observed internationally. For any forensic practice to go through, it needs to observe this important principle. In this presentation, we'll explore the following: the background of the LOCARD exchange principle, the context and application of the LOCARD exchange principle. I'd like to talk further to the examples of trace evidence. And I'll lastly speak to the management of evidence from a crime scene. Let's start by just getting a small background about Dr. LOCARD. Dr. LOCARD was born in France in 1877 and became fascinated with forensic science at a very early age. In terms of his career, he studied medicine and he studied law as well, which is a rare combination. But his passion was always in criminology and forensic science. One of the first forensic scientists to use physical evidence to solve crimes was Dr. LOCARD. And in terms of his legacy, he pioneered research into the use of trace evidence and the LOCARD principle. He helped to pave the way for modern forensic science techniques. He further helped to establish the importance of trace evidence analysis in criminal investigation. Now, with all that background, globally, he is known as the father of forensic science. As I said earlier, the LOCARD principle is a cornerstone of forensic science. All the forensic sciences in the world, for them to approach the court of law with the evidence which they have gathered, they need to adhere to the LOCARD principle. You can have the best analysis, you can be the best analyst, you can have the best techniques, for as long as you don't adhere to the LOCARD principle, your results don't mean much. You will realize that when you get to court, most of the time, the argument is not about the results. is the testing of the LOCARD principle. Whether was the LOCARD principle observed? I'm going to go further to try and explain what I've just said. So it provides the foundation for the following. Firstly, we speak about evidence collection. When you collect your evidence, in your mind, you should be having LOCARD principle. As you collect your evidence, you need to ensure that your evidence is collected with precision. By precision, I mean whatever evidence you collect, you need to make sure that is kept safely and there's no third party who gets to the collected evidence. And again, that is the principle of LOCARD. It further says the evidence preservation is important. When you collect an evidence, you need to be very careful with the preservation. For example, let's say you go to a medicine, you collect blood. The blood that you have collected, you need to preserve it. You need to make sure that it's in the correct temperature so that it doesn't get degraded. Again, you need to know where you have put it so that no other person should have access to it. So the preservation must be 100%. Now, the collection of evidence and the preservation thereof is important because it's going to impact on the analysis thereof. There's a saying which says, garbage in is garbage out. You do poor collection and your preservation is very poor, then you won't have good analysis. And once you do the analysis with poor collection and poor preservation, we are going to end up with poor interpretation, because interpretation that we'll be interpreting, it won't be pure what we have collected and what we have preserved. Again, dwelling a bit more into analysis. As you do analysis, you need to analyze an exhibit once at a time. You don't have to mix your collection. Once you mix your collection, we have what you call contamination or cross-contamination. And once you have contamination, there's no way that your results could go through to court. I repeat, most of the time in court, when the hearing starts, it's not more about the results. It's more about what did you do? How did you collect? Where did you preserve and how? How was the analysis done? Who did the analysis? Which machine was used? What was the temperature of that office where you did the analysis? Who has access to that office? Does it keep records of who goes in and who goes out? Now, that is important according to LOCARD, because once you cannot account for that, there's no way your case can stand in court. Now, moving further to talk to the reference sample. The reference sample is to go to the original where the exhibit was produced. You would like to do the comparison between what you have collected at the crime scene and what you suspect to be from. Now, when you do the analysis of your reference and the analysis of your evidence which you collected from the crime scene, those two, they must not come into contact to each other according to LOCARD. They must be kept aside. So let's say you have a rape case. You need to analyze what you got from the crime scene and what you got from the suspect. Those two samples must be analyzed at different places, different offices, and they must never be analyzed on the same day. They must be analyzed on different days. and they must be analyzed on different machines by different analysts or investigators, so as to adhere to the LOCARD principle. Once you do them at the same day, same time, same machine, same office, now the argument in court will be more about cross-contamination. It won't be about the results. So according to LOCARD, once you deal with your evidence and you deal with the reference, they need to be done differently and they mustn't be in contact with each other. We can move to the next one. Here, I would like to talk to the evidence that we use in court. This evidence is what is the one which is usually used to talk to the LOCARD principle. One of them common samples or evidence or trace evidence that you use is blood. For example, let's say you shoot someone or you stab someone, there will be some blood spatter. It will be on your clothing, and it's not easy to see it with your naked eye. So that trace evidence is the one that will be used. So blood is one of the important trace evidence we use. In a rape case, an important trace evidence, it will be your sperm, which you find in your seminal fluid. Other trace evidence that you use is the hair. As we know, for every given 10 minutes, a normal being will lose hair from his or her head in the area whereby you are. So these exhibits are very crucial. Now you see here, I've got a tooth and I have a femur, the long bone. Let's say an individual has been killed and has been burned beyond recognition. So what evidence are we going to have to know who is this individual? So one would will break open a tooth or teeth to try and get results, DNA out of that so that you can do the profiling. Or you break open the femur of your leg. When you break open the femur of your leg, you'll find red cells in there. And those red cells will be your trace evidence. That's what it helps us to say, no, this individual belongs to this family or not. Another trace evidence we can use is glass here. If you break into the house, then you go away as a suspect and you get caught. The first thing which the police officers need is your clothing. Checking your clothing, one should find small splits of glass. That glass, those small pieces of glass can be taken and compare them to the house where it was broken. Now, scientifically, you can prove that that small piece of glass originated from where. And here at the bottom, we've got a bullet, and we've got cartridges. I would like to quote Professor Hoek and Professor Siegel, who are the renowned forensic scientists. According to them, many published studies have demonstrated that no two firearms produce the same unique marks on fired bullets and cartridges cases. This is even true being from the same manufacturer. Now, if you look at your bottom right at the bullet there, you can see some scratches there. Now, this scratch is from a particular firearm. There's no other firearm would produce the same marking like the one which did there. So the firearms will produce different markings uniquely. And you look at your bottom left is your cartridges. The firearm has damaged the pins of the cartridges the same way. And if you compare them using the IB system, you'll see that the damage is the same. One would go further and further talking to the exhibits, but that's the bit that I could talk to. The premise of the LOCARD principle. Dr. Nghoka says, every interaction between two objects or between two surfaces or between an object and a surface or between people or two persons or persons and objects results in an exchange of material which leaves a trace. Now, these traces is the traces that we will find at the crime scene. Now, these traces, they are crucial and very important for a forensic investigation. I would like to dwell a bit in the crime scene investigation, talk to the application of the LOCARD principle by investigators. I would like us to appreciate how it affects us, how it affects an investigator. Now, when there's a crime scene, the first thing that has to happen, the crime scene needs to be cordoned immediately, and it must be cordoned by the first officer that comes to the crime scene. And that officer, we will say, is a first responder. And when that officer comes there, he needs to take the photos of the overall area. And close-up photos should be taken as well. It is important to go to cordon the crime scene. And it is very important to stay there and guard the crime scene. Once you move away from the crime scene, it's not guarded, it's going to create a lot of problems in court. I would like to take you to the recent case, the case of Senzomeiwa. The officer came there. He realized that it's a crime scene, and he acknowledged the crime scene. Then he left. He left the crime scene. He went to hospital to go and check on the late Senzomeiwa. That was a big mistake. Now, in court, they're asking him, when you were at the hospital, who guarded the crime scene? Can you prove to us that the crime scene was not disturbed? Can you prove to us that there was no third party who came into the crime scene? And indeed, when he was away, being in hospital, the neighbors came into the house. The first thing they did, they took the bottles of beer and the glasses to throw them away so that the police shouldn't know that they were drinking liquor. They didn't know that they're interfering with the evidence. You can imagine if you drink with a bottle, you are leaving your epithelial cells there, which is a trace evidence. By drinking with a glass, you leave your epithelial cells there, which is good evidence. By touching the glass, you are leaving your fingerprints and you are leaving your DNA there. Now, the crime scene was already disturbed. To make matters worse, the neighbor started cleaning the floor to remove the blood. That was interference. Now, firstly, they disturbed a technique which we call blood spatter pattern. The way the blood comes out from a body of an individual. Remember, an individual's body is full of pressure. And once you get shot or stabbed, the blood wants to come out. And the way it comes out, it gives a good clue to the investigators. So that was disturbed. And the blood was washed. Unfortunately, they didn't know that you can see the blood even if it's washed through the new techniques. Even the old techniques, you could use what you call the blue star. You could detect that blood was removed, but it's still there. Going to the second issue of the crime scene. You need to identify the evidence in the crime scene. A rough sketch and a neater final copy of the crime scene drawn to scale must be made, because after 3 years or 4 years, you won't remember how the crime scene looked like. And besides that, the court wants the sketch, wants the pictures to scale as to what transpired. So you need to identify what is in the crime scene. So the officer who came to the crime scene should have identified the bottles of beer, should have identified the glasses, should have identified the blood spatter, the pattern thereof, and the blood on the floor. But he never did that. He left and went to hospital. Now, according to LOCARD principle, that needs to be preserved and be kept aside, and there shouldn't be any contact with any other issue. Otherwise, it will leave a false trace. Can you move to the next one? Now, when you get to the crime scene, some other police officers, they say a crime scene is a holy place. Well, it's holy to them because that's what is going to take them through to court, because going to court is not as easy as that. It's painful and it's stressful. Hence, they call it a holy place for them to take them through to court. Now, when you came to get to a crime scene, you need to tread very carefully. You need to look at the crime scene, and you need to make a determination as to what will be your approach, because crime scenes differ. A crime scene which is outside in the playground is different from the crime scene which is in the house, and it's different from a crime scene which is in a double-story house. So your approach need to be relevant. So here are some of the ways you can approach your crime scene. The first approach is the grid. You break your crime scene into grids and decide which small grid you will start with. You'll have the beginning and you'll have the end. It needs to come out very clearly. The second approach, you call it a linear approach, which is like a maze. You have a beginning point and the ending point, and you need to adhere to that so that you don't miss any trace. The third approach is a quadrant or zone approach. You break your crime scene into zones, and this approach is usually used when we have a very big area. So you break it into zones, and that zone is break it into smaller zones. And the fourth approach is the spiral approach. In this one, is very tedious, and you are trying to be extremely careful. You start from the exterior, and you move slowly till you end to the middle of the crime scene. So these are the four approaches which one can adopt to make sure that you are able to explain yourself. How did you approach the crime scene, and how did you collect? Now, moving to the fourth item, which is secure the collected evidence. This is very crucial. All evidence must be properly packaged, properly sealed and labeled using specific techniques and procedures. When you are at a crime scene and you collect an exhibit, you need to put it in a particular container. They call it an exhibit container. This exhibit container is tamper-proof. But tamper-proof is once you put it in and you seal it, if you try and open it, you break the seal and you cannot reseal it again. Now, it is important to use that to ensure that it was not tampered with. After packaging, before talking to the further packaging, when you package one item individually, you don't mix with other items. Let's say you get a firearm and a cartridge and a bullet in the same area. You don't put them together in one package. You put them in individual packages which are sealed, and these packages must be labeled with your name, the time, the area, as to how the situation was. So the packaging is very crucial, and this packaging, the way it's labeled, in your report, when you go to court, you're going to be explaining what you have written in your packaging. It will be part of your report that I received an exhibit, it was sealed, the exhibit package number was this, it was written with my name, it was sealed on this particular day. So that will be part of your report or your affidavit for the courts. Let's move to the next one. So here I'm trying to say, your crime scene, what is the essence of the crime scene? The essence of the crime scene is to get the evidence collected, get the evidence from the victim, and get the evidence from the suspect, and reconstruct. You can even see the structure. The crime scene is up there, the victim is bottom left, the suspect is bottom right, the evidence is in the middle. All this is spread as if there are 4 different issues. Again, this is because of the LOCARD principle. You need to adhere to the LOCARD principle for your case to be successful in court. Once you deviate from the LOCARD principle, you can forget about your case. You can move on, Prof. The chain of custody. Chain of custody speaks to the management of your evidence. Once you collect your evidence from the scene of crime, you need to manage it carefully yourself and not other person to manage it for you. Now, the chain of custody refers to the chronological and documented records. Number 1, records of custody. Once you receive it from the crime scene, you keep it in your custody. You submit it to the forensic lab for analysis. The people who receive it will keep in their custody. Once the exhibits are given to the analyst will work on it, keeping it to his or her custody. When an analyst is busy working on an exhibit or evidence, when he wants to take a break, she wants to go and see the doctor, whatever, you don't leave your evidence or exhibits on the table. You take it into your safe. Even if you have 1,000 analysts, every analyst will have his own strong safe. You do analysis, you want to go to the bathroom, you have to take your exhibits back into the safe, lock them in. When you come back, you'll take them out. So the custody should be 100%. Even in your report, you say the same thing, that the evidence was in my custody and it was under lock and key 24/7. And you say that with confidence, so that if the court wants to go and verify what you are saying, they should find it like that. And nobody keeps the key of your safe. You move home, you go home with your key. So your exhibit, your evidence, you keep it in custody 100%. And you must have total control of your exhibit. You must decide where must it be kept. If it goes to analysis, where must you take it to? And you need to get proofs that prove thereof. Now, again, the transferring of exhibits for analysis. You don't give over to the next person to say, look, this is the next stage, you need to do analysis. No. There is a procedure, there is a policy in place, and the policy is clear. When you hand over, you go into the digital system, records must be done, and the manual system, whereby you get all the information of the person you're giving the information to, and you exchange that information, then that is kept in your file or in your docket. And that transfer information it will be needed after 6-10 years. So the transfer is extremely important, that this evidence, when it left me, it went to person B, and from person B, it went to person D. Now, after the transfer is the analysis. With the analysis again, you need to keep an eye on your evidence. For example, you take evidence for analysis, you need to have records to whom you gave it to analyze it. That person who was analyzing it must keep records on which day was it analyzed, on which machine was it analyzed, was the machine calibrated, does the machine qualify to do the analysis? Again, was the door working? Does the door record who goes in and who goes out? What was the temperature on that day of the machine? And what was the temperature of the room on that particular day? Which day did you go and fetch your analysis after it's completed? Did you fetch it yourself, or did you send somebody to fetch your analysis? And after that, once you have done your analysis, it doesn't matter whether it's a rape case, it's a murder case, whatever case it is. Let's use a firearm, for example, and cartridges which were collected from the crime scene. Once the forensic expert has finished doing the analysis, he needs to give back that evidence to the first responder, the person who gave it to you. You need to give it back to him with records in place. I gave it back to him on this particular day, this given time. It was in this shape. It was in a seal bag. The seal bag number was this number. And I've written ABC on top of it. Now, those records are extremely important. Again, they go back to LOCARD's principle. The LOCARD says everything that you touch, it must be managed. And there mustn't be a third party to be in contact with it. Once there is a next contact, it's new evidence. That's what LOCARD is saying. Thank you. We can move to the next one. Here, I would like to share with you the famous South African cases where LOCARD principle was or is still instrumental. And with this, I'm trying to say to us, there's no way you can deviate from LOCARD. The crux of the matter in the court of law is about LOCARD's principle. When you see the advocates and the attorneys making noise, fighting each other, they are not talking about the outcome. They are not arguing about the outcome. They are talking about how did you manage your evidence. Let's look at LOCARD, at Oscar. The LOCARD principle played a critical role in this case to link Pistorius to the crime scene evidence. Yes, he was linked in many ways. First, the way he was linked is about this firearm, which he left on the floor. When you got there, you got the firearm, very beautiful, shiny firearm. It was on the floor. Next to it, there were cartridges. And inside the toilet, there were bullets. So what we did, we collected that and go and compare, like I explained earlier. And when you collected the firearm, the cartridges and the bullets, they were treated separately as if they are not from the same person, according to LOCARD, so that there mustn't be contact. So in this case, the LOCARD principle plays a very critical role. That's why we managed to get the perpetrator behind bars. It worked very well. Now, let's compare it to Senzo. In Senzo, the LOCARD principle is continually being put to test, as I explained earlier. The investigating officer left the crime scene. That doesn't adhere to LOCARD. The neighbor came and removed the exhibits. That doesn't talk to LOCARD. The neighbor came and cleaned the floor and the walls. That doesn't speak to LOCARD. So once you start interfering with LOCARD's principle, there's no way you get your case through. And then lastly here, I'm talking about Knysna fire. Here, again, we're trying to find out what is the cause? What are the traces? What caused this fire? We're desperately looking for evidence, the cause thereof. What was the accelerator? Did they use paraffin? Did they use petrol? Did they use diesel? So we collected samples to go and analyze to see whether can we find any flammable liquids there. We couldn't find any. And lastly, it was determined that this was caused by lightning. The lightning, a small light, stayed there for weeks, and once it started exploding, it caught fire. So here the cause was lightning. So in these two cases, I'm trying to say, look at the Oscar Pistorius case and look at the Senzo Meyer case. The Senzo Meyer case, at the beginning, it was really struggling because LOCARD's principle was not adhered to. It is starting now to start and gain momentum. But again, the argument will be about LOCARD. If you follow it, if you are going to be listening to the arguments are going to be about LOCARD's principle. They're going to be about the crime scene was contaminated. The crime scene was never respected. It was not guarded. All the exhibits were not there. It was cleaned. So there was a third party there. So the evidence that is there is the traces of other people. Thank you. Can move to the next one. I would like to play a small clip here about LOCARD's principle. Can we please appreciate it? It will take about 3 minutes. Thank you.
If you've ever taken a forensic science class, you've probably heard of LOCARD's exchange principle. This is a key kind of component of the forensic science and what forensic scientists do.
Is it audible,
so
General?
I should include the quote from the professor
Yes,
himself.
it's audible, Prof.
LOCARD's exchange principle states that wherever he steps, wherever he touches, wherever he leaves, he unconsciously will serve as a salient witness against him. Not only his fingerprints or his footprints, but his hair, the fibers from his clothes, the glass that he breaks, the tool mark he leaves, the paint that he scratches, the blood or semen he deposits or collects. All of these and more bear mute witness against him. This is evidence that does not forget. This is not confused by the excitement of the moment. It is not absent because human witnesses are. It is factual evidence. Physical evidence cannot be wrong. It cannot be prejudice itself. It cannot be fully absent. Only human failure to find it, study, and understand it will dismiss its value. Professor Edmund LOCARD. This is that key principle here. For forensic scientists are always looking for that physical evidence because it is unprejudiced. It is there. We just need to find it, and it could be in a variety of forms. So this kind of summarized the general summary of that would be whenever two objects come in contact with each other, traces of each are exchanged. Every contact leaves a trace, whether it's a small, whether it's something large, whether it's something very obvious. Every contact will leave some sort of trace. This is why it's important when going and investigating a crime scene, is not to have any of your own material, anything that you come in contact with as the scientist evaluating the scene, to have anything exchanged or kind of contaminate the crime scene. So this fact is that there is a salient witness that those investigating the crime scene need to find and interpret them correctly for the significance. So initially you might look at this and just see it's wood, some older wood, but we could see there's some footprints. So there might be also some fibers left behind. There could be some fingerprints. There could be potential blood splatter. There's a whole different assortment of things we want to consider and not dismiss as scientists. So every contact leaves a trace. This applies to both the people involved in the crime scene originally and also, as I said, the investigators. As an investigator, you want to limit your traces left. You want to go into the scene undisturbed and be able to collect the evidence without kind of adding any of your own. Having things prepared ahead of time and knowing what to look for, having an idea what to look for can be helpful. So finding the trace, it's not as easy as in your face per se type of evidence, and maybe limited to investigators' abilities and or access to equipment or technology. So you might see just kind of this blank blackboard here. Well, if you dust it, you could find fingerprints or trace elements with fiber. So there's a lot of things, and trace elements is very key and important. So it's being mindful of what to look for and knowing how to look for it, how to find it, and how to eliminate any potential contact that you're adding. Because remember, every contact leaves a trace, so it's your ability, and hopefully you can find that in a crime scene, and that can really be a very important part of the diagnosis and evaluation of that crime scene.
Thank you, Prof. We can move to the next one. Now, I'd like us to speak to the challenges and limitations of applying the LOCARD principle. The first issue I would like to speak to is the contamination. Contamination is the potential for cross-contamination between samples is a major challenge in forensic science. Like I said earlier, once you have contamination, you can as well stop your analysis because there's no way it will go through to court. But if it can happen to go through and you have a contamination, the following would mean that the person who was the perpetrator, who was supposed to go behind bars, will go through because contamination won't be pointing a finger at him or her. So contamination is one of the challenges which are a limitation to the LOCARD principle. The second limitation is human error. Mistakes made during evidence collection and analysis can compromise the validity of the results. Like I said earlier, whatever you collect, it must be quality collection. It must be precise, because once you have collected, the person will have to analyze what you have collected. And if you have collected garbage, this person will analyze garbage, and garbage will be interpreted. And that will not good for criminal justice. And that will make the community to lose confidence in the criminal justice. So contamination, human error is a serious limitation. Now, what I'm saying is quality management system needs to be followed at all times. There are policies at the workplace which are talking precisely to the LOCARD principle, or which are based to a LOCARD principle, which says you need to follow the quality management system. That's why you see people when they come to the crime scene, they must wear the correct gear of the crime scene. At some stages, we use stepping plates when you go into a crime scene. Stepping plates, you come with the plates, we put them all around the crime scene. As you walk around, you walk on stepping plates because you don't want any trace of you there. You don't want any trace of your hair. You don't want any trace of your epithelial cells. You don't want any trace of your DNA. In short, we don't want you there. We want pure evidence. You just need to do the collection and be away. Don't add any traces of your cells. So the quality management systems have been put in place at the crime scene. The crime scene has a quality management system, and the laboratory has the quality management system. Maybe in the coming days, as we speak further, we'll talk to the quality management system of evidence recovery from a crime scene. In conclusion and future direction for the forensic science research, I would like to say the LOCARD principle remains a cornerstone of forensic science, providing a framework for the collection and analysis of trace evidence. It has been used to solve countless crimes throughout history and continues to be an essential tool in modern forensic investigations. Here are the references which I would invite you to look at. Coincidentally, yesterday, Judge Rata, the judge who's taking care of the Senzamo US case, cited the first one of Professor Hook and Professor Siegel. He asked the investigator, actually he quoted the two professors and he wanted the opinion of an investigator. So what I'm saying is we as academics, it's important to have our theory on fingertips because it's needed in court as well. It's not only for exam purposes, it's not only for passing exam. We need it when you go out. With those few words, I would like to thank you, Prof, and say thank you to the listeners.
General, I am so blown away by the absolute intricacies that go into this part of the work. And I'm sure our students and our guests that have joined are equally impressed and amazed. I'm going to open the floor for questions. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand. If there are questions from the audience, raise your hand. I will acknowledge you. And then I will take the first 3 people for questions for the general. And that's how we will proceed. If you are not comfortable to ask on the open platform, please feel free to pop a question into the chat box. Any questions from the floor? General, it seems that you have so impressed our audience that everybody's probably also still processing the information like I am. I just want to clarify one thing, General, with your permission. You spoke about the custody and the custody of, let's say, an exhibit, a fingerprint, or let's take a cartridge. Let's take a cartridge. Is it, to what extent should that chain of custody be kept as short as possible, and why? Can we have 20 people working on one thing? Or in this case, is less a better principle? Just your opinion on that, please.
Oh, thank you, Prof. That's a very important question. The chain must be as short as possible. Let me give an ideal chain in this one. An exhibit will be collected from the crime scene. That will be first person. It will be handed over to the forensic lab, the central area, which is the second person. Then it will be handed to the analyst, which is the third person, and it will be handed back to the crime scene investigator, which is the first person. So it takes between 4 and 5 people. The shorter the chain, the better for the court. The longer the chain, the more problems. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. I see we have a hand from the audience. Timbani, you may unmute yourself and pose your question.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, General. You know, taking from the current case of Senzo, there's an issue where the defense lawyer raised an issue of a firearm that was used and assessed by forensic. And that firearm was kept not in a safe place or was not sealed. And also it has to be disposed after a certain period. How far true is that evidence when you look at how they handled the evidence as to when or after how long must the evidence be disposed after it has been used?
Thank you. Well, as we know that the case is still in process, I'll just be careful how I answer, but some part of it is easy. Firstly, the firearm is not supposed to be disposed of. After analysis, it needs to be given back to the investigating officer. That's why in court, they wanted to see the proof of that firearm. So it was if it was destroyed, it was going to be a big problem. It is good it was not destroyed, and it came to the court of law and they saw it. And remember, every firearm has a registration number. Now, what the criminals do, they will shave out the registration number. But we are in a position to shave in further to find it. There are chemicals that we use to activate that number. So what I'm saying is it was important that it was not supposed to be disposed of. And secondly, remember I've been talking about the LOCARD principle to say every given time you need to be in control of your exhibit, and it must be in a seal bag. And once it's not in a seal bag, you're asking for trouble. Hence, there's this argument. Whether did you keep it in a seal bag sealed, or where was it? If he says it was not sealed, then the investigating officer is going to suffer for a very long time. Or why did he do that? Thank you.
Thanks so much, General. Thanks, Timbani, for that important question. I think it's always nice to situate our study material with what is actually going on in real life and see how it impacts. And I think this underscores the absolute importance that the General laid on the issue of custody. Donald, I see your hand. I'll acknowledge you now. And how important it is to be able to prove every step of the way that Article A that is being presented in court is exactly the same as the article that was seized at the crime scene. And if it has been changed in any manner or form, why it's changed, for example, because it's gone through an analysis process or whatever the case might be. Donald, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thanks, Prof. And good day, General. With regard to the issue of LOCARD principle and in terms of safekeeping of custody, in cases whereby you've got an instance where you have to move in between provinces, I've seen it happen before, like the investigator will be going to, say, Bloemfontein by flight, and then they will seize documentation and seal them in the seal bag, and then book them in the SAP 13 and book them out. And during the night, maybe they're going to have an overstay. He is in possession of that seal bag, but he sleeps at the hotel. How important is it not to avoid taking that document to the hotels if it might become an issue in court?
Well, according to the chain of custody, you must be in control of that exhibit at all times. If you sleep in a hotel, that's why we have safes in hotels, that you log it in the safe. Maybe you go for dinner, you need to keep it in the safe. If the hotel doesn't have a safe, you go for dinner, you go with it. You keep it in your bag wherever you go to the bathroom, you go with it. At any given second, it must be under your control. Otherwise, it will be a problem. So if you are going to book it in this SAP 13, there are procedures. There is a policy for SAP 13. There will be a person who will be in charge of the SAP 13 that evening. You will take record, you will take accountability. If it's needed in court, we have what you call a occurrence book. In occurrence book, the occurrence book will tell that the occurrence book is well managed. It has entry numbers. You don't jump any entry number. It will mention that at a given time, the exhibit was brought in, I've accepted it, and I locked the safe. And when you come and fetch it, again, you go back to the occurrence book. After 6 years, when they want to, you go with your occurrence book, you go there as a person who was in charge of the safe, and you say, yes, it is true, it was under lock and key, it was under my guard at that night. Thank you.
General, thank you. Yeah, I've raised my hand because I'm picking up a principle here that seems to be feeding right through, and that is the principle of effective administration. So in other words, being able to situate or locate what you are doing, when you are doing it, by date, time, place, in terms of record keeping. The police have pocketbooks, but outside investigators don't necessarily get issued with a pocketbook, but you still need to be able to say, I use this notebook, it has consecutively numbered pages, this is where I wrote the entry, this is where I did the rough sketch, so that, as the general says, 6 years down the line, when you have to go to court, you can go and draw that notebook out of your store, or if you have it electronically, so that your evidence is there in terms of what you did, when did you do it, how did you do it, who was there, in terms of documenting. Vital principle laid down, General. Thank you so much. Are there any other questions? I see that we are out of time. We've gone past our hour. If there are no more pressing questions, I don't see any questions in the chat box. We will definitely get the General back to come and chat with us about the quality management systems and how one could do something similar, I suppose, in a private space, because I know private and corporate investigators sometimes work together with the SAPS on sometimes very large cases. And then it's also important to know what may you do and what may you not do, what should you do and what you should not do. General, if I don't see any other questions, I'm going to say thank you so much. It is very, very rarely that we get somebody of your caliber and with a diary as full as yours to come and chat with us and share your insight and wisdom. We were fortunate to have students from various levels. I invited the first years, the second years, and the fifth years. I have some master students on the platform as well. So it was so amazing, and we definitely look forward to another engagement with you on this platform, General. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Prof. I really appreciate, and thank you to the colleagues, and I would like to wish them good luck with their studies and all of the best. Thank you, Prof.
Thanks, General. Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, bye.